Now.
On 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app.
O'Connor and Company.
It's 5:06. It's Tuesday, and all right, now I'm going to say it. Election Day is a week from today. We're down to the final week. It's the final countdown. Julie Gunlock, are you buckled in? Do you have any idea what they're throwing at us in the next 7 days?
I'm nervous.
Yeah, you should be. Sean Kennedy will be our guest at 6:05. He, of course, president of Virginia's for Safe Communities. 6:35, Mike Clancy running for Congress in Virginia 10. 7:35, Derek Anderson running for Congress in Virginia 7. And then 8:05, Tom Homan, former acting ICE director. Lord knows he will be a part of the Trump administration strategy for resecuring the border and the deportation of criminal illegal immigrants allowed in this country by the Harris-Biden administration. So that's a loaded day. Dare I say we've got much to talk about, Julie Gunlock. It's so good to see you, though. Thank you for joining us.
Great to see you.
Are you, you and I are both battling colds, sort of, and I worry that this is going to be something, this is election season. We're all stretching ourselves thin. We're all sort of, doing whatever it takes to get the job done, and I hope that doesn't affect anyone on election day. Another reason to vote early, if you can, so that you're not sick on election day.
Yes.
I mentioned that it's the final countdown, and we have a tradition here when we're getting close to an election or when we're 8 months away from an election, just to make fun of the networks because they always act like the election. It's election season. The presidential election is 2 years away. But in this case, we're literally in the final countdown, so let's do it. That's right. Our extensive election coverage in the final countdown and final moments before Election Day is upon us. And then the 10 days it takes to count the ballots in certain states and jurisdictions. It is, in fact, the final countdown, and NBC News' Steve Kornacki tried his best to prepare the viewers of Meet the Press for exactly what's in store for them. Steve, take it away.
One thing we have noticed in the last couple of days, this is not all of the polls that are out there now, but we have seen a number, 4 in the last 4 days, that have shown very small, but in the context of this close race, potentially meaningful movement in Trump's direction. I don't want to overstate it, but at the same time, it's hard to ignore these 4. The CNBC poll came out the other day, has Trump ahead by 2. The Wall Street Journal poll, Trump ahead by 3. These are national numbers. Siena and the New York Times, a tied race. CNN, a tied race. The significance here is broader movement. Again, we're seeing in Trump's direction.
Now, these are national polls, of course, and I want to make sure that everyone realizes that we don't elect our presidents via national polls. The battleground polls are all showing an advantage for Trump, but within 1 percentage point. So they're really still toss-ups because of the margin error in these polls. The trend is moving in Trump's direction. But we're facing the reality here, as we've been discussing for the last week, that Trump could win the popular vote but lose the Electoral College. And I think Kamala Harris needs to answer the question as to whether she will, out of principle, hand that national poll victory to Donald Trump. She's been telling us, and the Democrats have been telling us, how the Electoral College is racist. It's an institution that protected slavery. It's unfair. It's anti-democratic. They should do away with the Electoral College. So if she wins the Electoral College but actually loses the national popular vote, shouldn't she, on principle, hand the presidency to Donald Trump?
It really is the question, and we've seen this behavior from the Democrats for years of denying the election, of saying that it was. I mean, Hillary Clinton came right out and said Putin stole the election. So I agree with you.
All right. Cut 3, Kamala on Sunday talked about the polling, talked about how the polling affects her campaign. And in the next couple of clips, I want you to listen to what Kamala Harris says and tell me if you think that they've sort of got a strategy here for Election Day and the hours after the polls close. First, Cut 3.
Madam Vice President, can you give us a sense of your internal polling at the campaign and how that is making or influencing your decisions on what to do over the next 9 days?
So, to be very frank with you, my internal polling is my instinct. I let the campaign people deal with all that other stuff. And I am responding to what I'm seeing. I mean, just 2 nights ago, we had 30,000 people show up. I think it was actually more than 30,000 people.
For Beyonce.
With an incredible amount of enthusiasm. If you see the people who are showing up last night, every event that we do, and the feeling is one of energy and excitement. What I love about the folks who are showing up is it's every walk of who we are as a country and as Americans.
Yeah. All right. So she says nothing about her internal polls. She instead trusts her instincts and what she sees in the crowds, which tells you her internal polls aren't good, right?
Yeah. Right.
Otherwise, she would say, we have nothing to worry about. We're fine. Don't believe what you're hearing from the Washington Post. And then in this cut from Kamala Harris, again on Sunday, she sort of reveals that they have a very real and concerted plan, if they need to address the balloting, the ballots, and the court system. Listen.
Well, so you have teams ready to go? Is that what you're saying? Are you thinking about that as a possibility?
Of course. This is a person, Donald Trump, who tried to undo a free and fair election, who still denies the will of the people.
Yeah, so she's got her election teams ready to go and fight this thing. Of course they're ready. And we spoke with Lara Trump. She says that they're ready. I hope they are. The strategy for Democrats is to have the lead at some point and then declare victory and then let it get fought out in court. See, they learned the lesson of 2000. Always be in the lead when you walk into a courtroom because a judge is not going to want to overturn that. Meanwhile, if you're wondering what they're saying on MSNBC, as they see these polls, it's pretty simple. Listen to this clip. They think the whole thing is rigged. They think that there are right-wing conservative pollsters who are skewing the numbers.
That's the setup narrative, because they'll put these polls back up in your face on Wednesday, Thursday, Friday morning and go, "But Donald Trump was leading by 6. How did we lose?" And so the reality of it is, I agree with you, Tom. You can't really take these polls to heart.
I want to understand what Michael Steele, former chairman of the Republican National Committee, and we Maryland Republicans, aren't we proud of him today? What he's saying is that there are these conservative right-wing polls who are in the mix, and they're overstating the Republican results. They're saying that Trump's leading by 4, 5, 6 points. And so when the reality of the Democrat blue wave happens on Election Day, MAGAs are going to be all, what? This was rigged. This was stolen from us because we were in the lead and they stole it from us. And that's going to fuel the next insurrection. That's what he's saying. I'm going to let him finish, but I just want to make sure that I filled in the context there.
Well, Michael Steele is correct that there are some polls that lean right and there are some polls that lean left. For his theory to work, you have to suggest he's basically suggesting that they're all in the middle except these outlier right-wing ones. So he's suggesting that there's just these outliers, but they're only on the right.
Right. There's no outliers on the left.
On the left, there are.
Right. And everything that overstates the Democrats' numbers are actually accurate, which is shocking because I'm old enough to remember when he was the Republican chairman. In 2010, he was saying a very different thing.
Right.
He had a very different story about the polls. But it's different when you sit on set with, Mika Brzezinski and Rachel Maddow.
Joe Scarborough.
Every day.
Yes.
All right. Yeah, that's right. That's what that dude's name is, Joe Scarborough, not Rachel Maddow. I apologize. It's a fair mistake. All right, so you're going to hear more. I really do want you to hear what MSNBC is saying right now and how they're rationalizing the poll numbers, because they think the polls are rigged. They think they're in the lead. And they also think that the way the polls are coming out right now is setting up Trump supporters for a devastating loss and potentially the next insurrection, as they would put it. You'll hear that in a moment. It's 5:15.
WMAL. Making sense of the news.
Live
from the Home Paramount Pest Control Studios.
Home Paramount, the leader in pest control since 1939.
All right, so as I said, let's get right to it. This is cut 5 now. This is basically, they believe that the polling averages, we talk about the Real Clear Politics average or the 538 average, and their theory here, and it's been pushed by a couple of Democrat analysts over the last several weeks. Their theory is they call them red wave pollsters. These are pollsters, they think it's Rasmussen, Trafalgar, Tip, a couple of others, who skew their sample over generously for Republican turnout. And so their numbers show Trump doing much better than the reality on the ground. And by including those right-wing outliers that overstate Republican results, that skews the Real Clear Politics average down. And those polls aren't real, and so it's a manipulation of the data. And Michael Steele has bought into this, and these other people on this panel at MSNBC have bought in on it. And, because a lot of people are probably watching this saying, oh, my gosh, I wonder what they're saying on MSNBC when they see these numbers. Well, this is what they're saying. I'll tell you, they are rationalizing this. They think they're in the lead. They think they're in a good position, and they think MAGA is being set up for a devastating loss because everyone's riding high thinking that they're going to win. And so this will fuel even more concerns that it was stolen. It's like, no, well, you can't do this. You stole this from us because we were in the lead. We knew we were in the lead. How did this happen? And they're saying that you're being fooled. You're being lied to by these manipulating polls. Now, take a listen to how the conversation developed.
That's the setup narrative, because they'll put these polls back up in your face on Wednesday, Thursday, Friday morning and go, well, Donald Trump was leading by 6. How did we lose? And so the reality of it is, I agree with you, Tom. You can't really take these polls to heart because the zone has been flooded with a lot of bad information to bring the averages down for Kamala, because we're basically looking at Trump's ceiling. And so how then do we process the rest of the campaign setting these polls aside?
And what does the early voter data tell us? Because
exactly.
Chairman is right. This is the same thing that happened in 2022 with the red wave and all the polling.
Right.
He's exactly right about what's going on.
Well, and we have to remember in 2022, the average poll missed by 5 points. Which is a big miss. It's why the polls told us that there was going to be a red wave, and it didn't happen because of these red wave polls.
Right.
And the news is, as you said, Simon Rosenberg has shown us that it's actually a bigger op this time around. There are many more of these red wave pollsters out there doing what they do. So what the early vote is actually telling us is that turnout actually looks pretty good for Democrats, which is somewhat surprising. We didn't expect. We knew that in 2020 there was huge early voting turnout. Democrats were more COVID conscious. Republicans were told by Donald Trump that voting early was fraud. So Democrats dominated it. We expected to see that shift. We know Republicans have been pushing the early vote so far. We're seeing a small shift. We're not seeing the sort of shift that Republicans were counting on. In states like Michigan and Wisconsin, Democrats are actually leading in the early vote at this moment. And states like Georgia and North Carolina, where Republicans started off hot, it's actually coming back together, and it looks more like it did in 2020, which is certainly a good sign for Democrats.
All right. So is this a dose of reality for some people? Is this a way of taking a look at how they're rationalizing their own, existential threat here a week before Election Day? Or is it, just being an Eeyore and looking on the most negative possible aspect? It's probably a little bit of all the above for me 1 week out. But I think it is important to know what their conversation is, and it's important to know what data sets and things are sticking out to them right now as they're a week away.
Larry, but I'd be interested in, do you think they're right?
Well, you know what? I don't. And here's why. Because to believe that, you will have to believe that all of these battleground states are being overly skewed in one direction or another. So let me take Arizona here. I'm looking at Arizona polls, and since September 28th, only one poll, and it's that poll, September 28th, shows Kamala Harris in the lead. That's Wall Street Journal. Every single other poll shows Trump up by either from anywhere from 1 to 5. And by the way, the +5 for Trump is New York Times. And I don't think they're one of the right-wing red wave.
According to them, that they're suggesting that's the red wave.
Right.
That's the right
that's
wave.
what I'm not understanding.
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
You look at maybe Arizona's not the best case. Maybe you look at Michigan. All right. So in Michigan, again, there's only 2 polls going all the way back to October 2nd. Only 2 polls show Kamala Harris in the lead, Bloomberg and Quinnipiac. Every other poll, Insider Advantage, Trafalgar, Atlas International, Mitchell Research, Rasmussen, The Hill, and Fabrizio. And again, I don't know which ones they say are right-wing, red wave, but every single, that's 2 polls for Kamala Harris, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 polls either showing Trump in the lead or in a tie. So I don't know exactly what they're stating here. That said, 2022 was a debacle. And the polls were very wrong, and we did feel, somewhat betrayed. I will also argue.
And we also in 2022 saw these rallies, saw the excitement, saw massive lines to get into a Trump rally. Yeah. So that's similar
to
Yeah,
In the midterms? Oh, I don't remember the rallies.
No.
Midterm.
No, and I'm sorry, in 2020.
I'm talking about 2022. So the reason they're saying this is in 2022, in the midterms, there was a call for a red wave, and it didn't show up. They said, the Republicans are going to win the House by 25 seats, and they got, 4 seats, right? Or 3-seat majority. So the difference, though, I think that the major thing that people should bear in mind is that those are polls based on either the national sentiment. In a midterm, you're polling the nation over do you want Republicans or Democrats? But that doesn't always translate to the districts. Much harder to poll a congressional district because it's a very narrow regional poll, and there isn't as much money spent on congressional district polling. And number 3, the presidential race is a statewide race. That's easier to poll, and there's much more excitement and momentum, and turnout is much more reliable on a presidential race versus a midterm race. They're relying on this race looking like the 2022 midterm race.
Right.
And I don't think a presidential race it's not an apples-to-apples comparison in terms of the quality of the data you get from the polls, number 1, and number 2, the turnout excitement. More Republicans are coming out for Trump and for the presidential election than they did for Kevin McCarthy and Leader Mitch McConnell in the midterms, right?
I see.
So that's how I'm. But listen, I don't know. I'm an observer. I'm a commenter. I'm an analyst, and I sometimes can make a funny joke.
I think
just from here. Okay, well, I'm glad. That's all that matters. But listen, buyer beware, and I just want everyone to be informed. I don't want everyone surprised. It's like, oh, how did this happen? Listen, over there on that side of the equation, this is what they're saying to each other, and it's food for thought. 524.
Now
on 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app.
O'Connor and Company.
5:36, and our happy little family keeps chugging along here every minute of the morning. Coming up at 6:05, Sean Kennedy is the president of Virginia for Safe Communities. How's the crime problem going to affect the election? 6:35, Mike Clancy running for Congress in Virginia 10. At 7:35, Derek Anderson, boy, razor thin right now, this race in Virginia 7. 8:05, Tom Homan, former acting ICE director. In fact, we're going to talk about Tom Homan right now. But first, ladies and gentlemen, it is my privilege, my honor, my humble duty to introduce to you Julie Gunlock.
You are in a rare form this morning. Good morning.
Well, why, thank you. Hey, they did it again. 60 Minutes. The way they're just, you know what? Why not? When you're exposed as a propagandist and a deceptive editor,
lean into it. Just
absolutely. It's like somebody at 60 Minutes just said, "Well, they caught us with the Kamala Harris thing. Hell with it. Let's just go all in." Tom Homan, who will be joining us later this morning at 8:05, he was on the program. Now, first, should we do this in this order here, Heather Hunter, you think? All right, let's start with Cut 6. It's the beginning of the 60 Minutes package they did, and specifically said, should Donald Trump win, we face the specter of mass deportation of immigrants in this country, right? Which, see, now, if I were presenting it, I would say, if Donald Trump becomes president, he'll actually do what this president hasn't done, which is enforce the law. Because legally, you're not supposed to let people into the country against our immigration laws. And if they do sneak in and stay in, you're supposed to apprehend them and deport them. Because that's what the law states. That's what Congress has laid out.
Right.
That's what former presidents have signed into law. The law of the United States federal immigration policy is if you're in the country illegally, you're to be apprehended and sent back to your original country.
Which, again, is what every European country does.
Every country
Asian
on the planet does.
Every country on the earth does this.
Even that evil empire Canada does this. All right? So don't even get me started.
They're so nice.
So we're the only country right now where we're supposed to be ashamed of the fact that we enforce our laws, and we're supposed to be terrified of a president who is literally saying, elect me and I'll enforce our laws. That's his campaign position. The nerve. You know what? He's just a Nazi is what he is for that one.
Nazi. That's right.
All right. So cut 6 here. Here's how 60 Minutes set the whole thing up.
With 9 days until Election Day, former President Trump has stepped up his attacks on the Biden-Harris administration's record on illegal immigration and pledged that if elected, he'll conduct the largest deportation in American history. There are more than 11 million undocumented immigrants living in the United States,
more than
about
that.
3% of the population. Nearly 80% of them have lived in the country for a decade or more. How realistic is this mass deportation campaign promise? What would be the human and financial cost? We took these questions to one of the people Donald Trump has said would join him if he wins a second term, Tom Homan, who led immigration enforcement during the first Trump administration when thousands of migrant children were separated from their parents at the border.
Now, I got to say this. At least the left has started to move on from last week's talking point on this one, which is if you deport all these people, who will pick our tomatoes and clean our toilets?
Right.
Which I guess they tested that one out, and it wasn't actually getting as much traction as they. It sounded a little racisty. It sounded a little like somebody, doing a news program in 1845 saying, if we free all these slaves, who's going to pick our cotton? Right. I hope everyone's ready to pay a little bit more for textiles, right? I mean, that's really what their message has been. All right, so then they put out this teaser clip. I mean, this is right from the playbook of what they did with Kamala Harris. Cut 7 now. Here's a teaser clip that they did with Cecilia Vega, who was doing the interview, and Tom Homan.
We have seen one estimate that says it would cost $88 billion to deport 1 million people a year.
I don't know if that's accurate or not.
Is that what American taxpayers should expect?
What price do you put on national security? Is that worth it?
Is there a way to carry out mass deportation without separating families?
Of course there is. Families can be deported together.
There you go.
No.
Larry, it's a great answer. Good for him.
Mm-hmm.
But can we all just take a moment that this woman is suddenly concerned about family separation when the Biden administration lost 300,000 children? Just poof. Yeah. We don't know where they are.
300,000
we don't know
children.
Where these 300,000 migrant children that crossed the border and are probably working in sex slavery or some sort of slavery of some sort, and they don't care. And neither do these reporters. They suddenly care about family separation when Kamala lost track of 300,000 children.
Good point. Tom, by the way, I've also heard people on the left claiming that statement there, you can deport the families together. Oh, so children who are U.S. citizens are going to be deported too. This is tantamount to ethnic cleansing. That's what it is. It's ethnic cleansing. All right, so cut 8. Tom Homan continues here. Go ahead and listen.
I hear a lot of people say, the talk of a mass deportation is racist. It's threatening to the immigrant community. It's not threatening to the immigrant community. It should be threatening to the illegal immigrant community. But on the heels of historic illegal immigration crisis, that has to be done.
How you doing?
At the Republican National Convention this summer, Tom Homan was the proud pitchman of mass deportation.
By the way, I want to play this because this is really important. Apparently, the interview was 2 hours. They sat with Tom Homan for 2 hours. What made it on air was 13 minutes. All right, so do the math. We've got an hour and 47 minutes unaccounted for. So let's play the part of this interview where Tom Homan makes the case about the danger to American citizens due to terrorists being allowed in this country and the fentanyl and the drug smugglers who have come in. Let's get to that clip now. Oh, I'm so sorry. I don't have that because that didn't make it onto the show. They edited all of that out, all of the actual existential national security dangers that we face. The reason why we have a protected border, that never made it to air. It was just about the plight of the people who are actually going to be dealt with legally and properly for breaking our laws. Cut 9, more of 60 Minutes with Homan.
What would the largest deportation in American history look like to you?
Well, let me tell you what's not going to be first. It's not going to be a mass sweep of neighborhoods. It's not going to be building concentration camps. I've read it all. It's ridiculous.
But if mass deportation is not going to be, as you said, massive sweeps and concentration camps,
there'll be concentrated,
what is it?
There'll be targeted arrest. We'll know who we're going to arrest, where we're most likely to find them based on numerous investigative processes.
All right. We've got more from this interview and also gives you a good taste because if this heats you up, if this bothers you, if you want to hear it straight from the horse's mouth, you're going to want to tune back in at 8:05 so you can hear Tom Homan as our guest. More on this interview from 60 Minutes and what was left out coming up in a moment. It's 5:44.
Headlines, analysis, perspective.
News Talk 105.9 WMAL.
Making sense of the news.
Workplace enforcement, that's a roundup.
And that's going to be necessary. Worksite enforcement operation just not about people who's working illegally in the country and companies that hire them that's going to undercut their competition that has U.S. citizen employees. It's where we find a lot of trafficking cases, women and children who are forced into forced labor to pay off their smuggling fees.
That's right. And you heard the 60 Minutes reporters outraged. Workplace enforcement, and think about workplace enforcement. You go into a workplace, everybody's breaking the law. Everyone who's there working is breaking the law because they're working illegally, and the employer is breaking the law by exploiting this cheap labor that shouldn't be there. And as you just heard, this is also where trafficking is taking place. You've got women and children who are working to pay off the people who have brought them into the country. Everybody's bad in this occasion. But see, 60 Minutes approached this entire thing. They had a story they wanted to tell. And the story was families will be broken up. And this is going to be terrible. This whole enforcing our laws thing is going to ruin our country. Tom Homan told Liz McDonald yesterday on Fox Business, said we sat for 2 hours, only 13 minutes made it on air. Most of it got edited out, obviously. I went in to talk about why we needed a secure border, the damage they've done to the country, why it's a huge national security threat. None of it made the final cut. I talked about how many suspected terrorists have been arrested across the border, people on the terrorist watch list. They edited out the amount of fentanyl coming across, killing 250,000 Americans. They edited out the 600% increase in sex trafficking. I talked about all of that. None of it made the final cut. Tom Homan said yesterday on Fox Business, they came in with a plan. They wanted to show that the massive deportation operation was going to be inhumane and it was going to separate families, and we were going to be like Nazis. That was their plan, and so that's the story they told. Well, Tom Homan will tell his story to you directly coming up at 8:05, but I want you to hear a little bit more of this. Let's go to cut 12, please. Cut 12, 60 Minutes with Tom Homan.
First implies others follow, though, right?
Absolutely.
So game that out for me. What's the scenario?
It's not okay to enter a country illegally, which is a crime. That's what drives illegal immigration. When there's no consequences, the Biden-Harris administration has proven this. You can get to the border, turn yourselves in, get released within 24 hours.
So you are carrying out a targeted enforcement operation. Grandma's in the house. She's undocumented. She get arrested too?
It depends.
Which?
Let the judge decide. We're going to remove people that a judge has already deported.
Homan's suggestion that grandma might face arrest would mark a major shift in policy.
Did you see that? Did you see what they did there?
Yes.
Homan's suggestion that grandma would be arrested. Well, no. She suggested that grandma would be arrested, and Homan said, listen, if the judge says the person needs to be deported, we'll deport, we'll apprehend and deport whoever it is. So Homan's not saying arrest grandma. But the reporter is saying arrest grandma.
Also, they just avoid the real issue here, right? Which is, you know, we know who's coming over that border. We know that it's usually young men of military age. We know that children coming over and women coming over are sexually assaulted. We know that then they get into some sort of employment situation where they can be exploited. And she avoids all that and brings up Granny getting deported. This rare case, or, you know, again, trying to make this an emotional issue or seem cruel. Again, avoiding the fentanyl, the crime, the gangs.
Well, the only takeaway is that 60 Minutes doesn't care about sex trafficking. They don't care about child exploitation. They don't care about the rapes. They don't care about the prostitution and the forced prostitution. They don't care about any of that stuff.
No, they don't.
Otherwise, that would be the line of questioning. Again, Tom Homan, now the victim of yet another 60 Minutes debacle disguised as journalism, very serious journalism. Tom Homan will join us at 8:05. It's 5:53.